are listening to Cosmic Perspective News, where spirituality and hard news coexist.
This is Cosmic Perspective News, where we train the spiritual eye on news and current events. I am journalist William Kern with my co-host, non-dual kabalistic shaman Timothy Rothschild, and we welcome you to the program. Tim, how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, William. How are you?
I'm all right. I'm glad we're doing the show. We had kind of an odd hiatus, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But before we get into this week's vexing questions on political thought forms, why we had a hiatus, whether mass surveillance is a spiritual good, Lord help me, it might be true. Can I say something about my mother? My mother was 85 years old yesterday. And since I'm her son, it will perhaps not surprise you to hear me say that I love her, and I thank her for all the selfless acts of love she has undertaken on her children's behalf, the incredible strength she has displayed in her determination to keep us alive and under difficult circumstances, and her support of my work, which, although not in the area of medicine or the law, which she would have preferred, is as far as she is concerned, at least in the public interest. So let me say to my dear sainted mother, I hope I saved your life in several previous existences. Otherwise, I'll have to come back here again and again. God only knows how many more times to karmically compensate for all of the difficulty and emotional abuse attendant on bringing me into the world. Thank you and happy birthday, Mom.
Happy birthday, Mom.
Thank you. Thank you, Tim. I really appreciate it. So many of you have noted in social media spots and other places that we've been on a hiatus. So Tim and I have been caught up in in particular whirlwinds of activity that blew things in some unpredicted directions. First, our contract with TalkNetwork.com, which required us to keep to a schedule, came to an end when the network, let us say, went ad hoc. So now we submit programs to the network whenever we do them, and that opened the door for us to take a breath and figure out where we were. And I don't just mean with this program. I mean in a lot of different areas. Just about at the same time, I was simultaneously compelled to research the potential of producing content in virtual reality. And when I say compelled, I mean I had to figure it out. I really wanted to figure it out. And I am in the midst of redesigning the website of our nonprofit worldmeets.us, where we translate content about the United States from newspapers around the planet so Americans can see what the rest of the world really thinks. Tim, because events being mounted by his new organization, Divine Productions, a promotional video of which is packaged with this program, he's triggering a wave of public reaction and has been plunged into something resembling a cross between the film Entourage and a Deepak Chopra speaking tour. Tim, would you provide some details about all that? Do you want to tell people about that?
Sure. Since this unannounced hiatus, many shifts, inner and outer. And, we've actually, I teamed up as part of one of my many endeavors that we can talk about. I teamed up with a DJ, actually a childhood friend of mine, DJ Gina Turner. And we created a company called The Divine Movement, now called The Divine Movement Corporation. And this falls under my vision for what I want to bring into the world with the Third Thing Network, which is going to be the Third Thing Incorporated. And essentially, my vision is that, I see a lot of the issues and the challenges that the world has today is deeply rooted in these cultures that are compartmentalized and have a difficult time communicating with each other. And the Third Thing's business model is designed to basically, blast into these deep cultures and transform them in an undeniable way. And right now, it looks like a show, that analyzes today's news from a non-material perspective. It looks like the Divine Movement Corporation, where we're changing the way events are done. And it's been received really well. Essentially, what it does is it brings 2 or 3 or even more things into a safe environment that creates something reveals something greater than the sum of its parts. And so, yoga, meditations, kung fu, tarot, numerology, healings, massage, workshops, all this kind of stuff. We kind of form fit it to whatever environment there is, and throw a big party. And it's the kind of energy that has to be experienced to believe. So Gina and I are bringing that out into the world. The Third Thing Incorporated and the Third Thing Network is moving along strong. So this hiatus has been a productive one.
So I just want to add that Gina is the voice of our intros and outros on this show.
Right.
And just an extraordinary human being that is fun to know.
Mm-hmm.
So we're working on VR content partly because I want people to be able to experience these events and actually get to know Tim in a more personal way. I might add, and I haven't spoken to Tim about this, but I've checked into this. And so what we're going to do is if people feel like donating to what we're trying to do, they can donate on the page of this program, and the proceeds will be shared between worldmeets.us and the Third Thing Network. And that will help us do what it is we're trying to do here. So where were we? So let's get down to business, Tim. So since we're at the end of the 2016 presidential primary election process, it occurred to me that we have a perfect example of how the non-material realms make their impact unmistakably known to those of us watching in our three-dimensional, as I say, meat packets, also known as human bodies. Extrapolating out, aren't election campaigns a metaphor for us all, since are we not all in exactly the same situation as the political candidates? Don't we all have extensive predictions and plans about our lives that more often than not never come to pass? And I wanted to take a look at this in the form of thought forms, or from the point of view of thought forms, because think of it. Since last summer, we have watched the dreams and mental construct of about 20 candidates built up and then obliterated. Since most of these campaigns come to nothing, I wonder if we can say that they occur more on what is often referred to as the mental and emotional planes than the physical one, and show the non-material world setting the stage for everything we see. Tim, before I get a little more into this, you have any preliminary comments about that?
Sure. It's really important, to understand sort of the nature of reality and how things unfold into this physical dimension, which seems to be the ultimate expression, that our five senses can tune into and, sense. So when you bring up the mental and emotional planes, those are definitely going to come into play. However, they only come into play in relationship to the potential that each one of us brings into this dimension. And we sort of live our lives unpacking that potential and bringing it into the world. So, when you take a look at the presidential candidates as a metaphor for the rest of our lives, I mean, it's a fantastic demonstration. You couldn't have said it any better. It really is, a really cool analysis of how we can bring our visions into the world, and being able to see it set up on the world stage with those kinds of how do you put it, with those kinds of stakes on the line. It's exciting and it's very alive.
But is it about how we bring them into the world, or is it how we fail to bring them in?
Right.
I mean basically a lot of things don't reach this how can I say, slow, energetic, on an energetic level, slow, cumbersome material world we live in here. 20 individuals, and this happens at every level of government, from city council to mayor to governor to congressperson, have described their plans, their dreams, their mental constructs for the country and the future, and these complex thought forms, which I would categorize as non-material objects, are what these long and expensive campaigns are based on. So millions of people bought into them. They contributed money. They contribute conviction and energy to help usher in these thought forms into physical existence. And then, like a puff of smoke, most of them are gone in seconds, minutes, or hours after the candidate insisted that they were about to come into being. And everybody saw this. Ted Cruz one day he's in the campaign, he's going to change the country, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. The next day, I'm out. He's out of the race. Right after John Bonner, former Speaker John Bonner called him Lucifer in the flesh, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. But two of the candidates, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, are still in the game. So, Tim, I have a series of questions, and I know you're going to give us a non-dual perspective on this, and I can't wait to hear it. So, when Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton came out, or when they come out and they say, something like, when I'm president of the United States, we will build a wall and Mexico will pay for it, or men and women will earn equal pay, or we will replace Obamacare with something really terrific. Should this be categorized as prophecy rather than fantasy, particularly if the predictions turn out to be true? I mean, what are we looking at here in terms of thought forms and their efficacy? It's just baffling to me. I really can't understand why things that Donald Trump say may come true, but things that, I don't know, any of the other candidates said will probably not come true.
Right.
It's not really clear.
Well, it's interesting, if you bring up prophecy, the way I see prophecy is it's somebody who tells the truth, and that is a whole philosophical exploration in itself. So how do you know what the truth is until you watch it unfold throughout all of our lives, So, like you said, and like I mentioned earlier, each one of us has this creative potential that they want to bring out into the world. So we have to see now, what sort of environment are the potentials of each one of these beings trying to bring into the world, and how are they feeding it through their mental constructs and through their emotional way of being? How charged are they? How inspired are they? How are they relating this to the public, and how are they able to meet in relationship with the people that are essentially feeding it with their energy and their thought forms, and to create some sort of a collective environment? So it's like it's a complicated process, but when it comes down to it, the way you bring this in is by meeting the moment and allowing it to unfold step by step. So that prophecy will become more and more clear. But that first moment that somebody decides to run for president, I don't know if it makes any difference between any of the candidates besides the fact that they're willing to do it. From there, all bets are off unless you want to start talking karmically, which I assume you may be down the line.
Well, it's an interesting thing. There have been many prophets over the centuries and over the history of the human race and so on. And I think that the alchemical ingredients in there is probably that they can sense thought forms that are out there already. Maybe it's not necessarily their own. Maybe it's partly their own, but it's partly, like, for example, the genius Donald Trump is, he seems to be able to get a sense of what people are thinking and what they are upset about, or what they're, what's moving the public. And he kind of seizes on that, and he takes that and he puts his own little curveball into it. So his thought form is in there, but, and tell me if I'm wrong or what you think about it, but his thought form is in there, but it's also that he can see or sense this other public thought form out there, and he's kind of taking his and taking that and putting it together in a way that will work to his own interests.
Right.
And I guess maybe that's what a politician does. It's probably some combination, and that is the talent of it,
right.
Perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, politics exists in everything. That's the holographic nature of reality. You can have politics of friendship, and you can have politics in what's most commonly known as, the political end game. And it doesn't need to have as much illusion and lies in it as it does. But right now we're seeing that negative expression, born from the unhealed ego. So, it's funny when you ask these questions, it's like, what dictates the presidential run, and who wins and who doesn't win? There's so much involved in it, because it's not, there's not a lot of purity at the moment. So what are we actually looking at here? Are we looking at, the Western view of a magician where it's sleight of hand, or are we looking at some true, mystics and consciousness creators, that are able to work with the way things are? It's an interesting exploration, and You know, it's co-creative ultimately, as personal beings and as a collective. This whole thing is, you know, I always look at it as a kaleidoscope, you know, where the creative potential exists in every moment. So you can have an idea of what it's going to look like, and that's what each one of these candidates have. But how it unfolds is very difficult to see unless you can truly have the power to influence in one level, or have the sort of, you know, I don't even know what it is, if these mystics have that sight. I don't know how that is, because I don't have it personally, but I stick to the linear unfolding and meeting the moment.
Well, it's certainly interesting to consider the different karma, like the karma of all of these individuals involved, the karma of the candidate, the karma of the people of the United States, the people of the various political parties, and a lot of other elements, like as you say. But let me take two particular policies. Okay, so let's take, for example, a desire for that for those of us who believe there is climate change going on, whether we can do anything about it or not, or whether or not reducing the amount of pollutants is going to help or not. So the policy is, we have to join with the world, and we have to cooperate, and we have to try and ameliorate this global problem that affects everyone. And then take this policy of, we're going to build a wall, and we're going to force Mexico to pay for it. There's two policies that are out there floating around. One of them seems to come from a different place than the other. So am I wrong?
No, I think you're right.
So, but when I say it's coming from a different place, what am I talking about? Is is this idea that we're going to build a wall and force Mexico to pay for it? Is that coming out of an emotional body? Is it coming out of the sacral center, one of the lower chakras? I mean, what do you think? I mean, how do you think about this? Is this, or is it some genius thing that Trump sees this issue and is a way to kind of rile people up, and he's using it for a larger purpose? And so maybe I am wrongly categorizing this as oversimplifying this as a lower chakra idea.
Yeah, well, I think those are all good questions. It doesn't need to be one thing or the other, but you will have more vivid expressions of one or the other. And I think, when you're really good at what you do, and Trump and Clinton both are, I think you're a little bit more inclusive in how you want to manipulate and control and feed certain energy systems, so the public relates to it and gets wrapped up and, starts to collaborate and, work with. Essentially, what we're looking at here is, how do you put it? Two different preferences. From a non-dual perspective, you're still allowed to have your preferences, but the issue is a lot of what this bipartisan government manipulates the public with is, oh, if you didn't like this, well, then you can choose that, where you don't want that, so you're going to choose this. But that's not true freedom. True freedom is being able to hold both of those things and let something else reveal itself, let something organically arise from within. And right now we've got this structure put in place that's designed to push people in one direction or the other. And, whichever one is able to feed those emotional bodies or those mental bodies, it really depends on what, collective of personal beings they want to work with, which I'm sure they've figured out with different pollings and, different ways to send the, manipulate consciousness. It's all a part of it, but essentially what I want people to understand is that it doesn't need to be one or the other. It can be both. And then a third thing can arise that you didn't expect to. Then that's a part of living in the unknown and real change, real transformation taking place.
Well, I mean, I wonder what an election would look like if we were all non-dual Kabbalistic people. I mean, what would that be like? They would be campaigning, and they would be trying to convince all of us non-dual Kabbalists to vote for them. I just wonder how different that would be.
Right. Me too.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this, Tim. If there's a way of explaining this, what is the secret of a successful thought form? Or in other words, how can we set the stage for our own personal goals and plans to come more fully into physical existence? Whereas, now, most of the time, I'm guessing for many people out there, we have a lot of plans and goals, and most of the time they don't come to pass.
Right. Without giving a full-blown workshop, I've kind of touched on this already, when talking about how.
Do you have a workshop about making thought forms real, come into real tangible form, or?
Well, I do offer workshops that explain the nature of reality and how, in many ways, and people that listen to my shows know I say this a lot: the water swims the fish. So the human vessel, the human avatar, as you like to say, the meat packet, is a vessel to allow life to live through us. So this river, just like the fish's gills that allows the river to flow them, life is a river, and we can fight it all we want, or we can surrender to what is. And many ways that has to do with healing work and healing the parts of our ego that very creatively figured out how to survive in our life. But as a result, being personal beings, we only have pieces of the whole. It's also the gift that we have to give to the world. But in order to bring these thought forms into the world, what we have to do is understand that there's much more available than just what we already see. So you allow the unknown to reveal itself to you as you become the highest artist, which is the pure vehicle for the statement. So you tap into that creative potential, which is where the thought form comes from, and you meet the moment as life flows through you and continually reveals the unknown to you, and the next step will always reveal itself. So it can be uncomfortable because the unhealed ego typically likes to stay in the familiar and typically likes to know things. But the way life works is the known and the unknown are of equal value. Confusion to chaos to order and structure, and then back to confusion and chaos. And all are needed in life. And when we have our preferences, that can be allowed, those can be allowed to live, but not in opposition, but instead working with.
Well, I mean, that kind of brings up the issue of keeping your kind of out of control intellects, in sync with the rest of your personality, and that's a very hard thing to do. What you were just saying reminded me of something that I heard Brenda Carter Blessing saying, and so this is one of the teachers at the Society of Souls. I hope you don't mind me talking about this, Tim.
No.
But this is I don't know. I've discovered this organization through you, and so what she was saying was that we have elements of our personality that were designed to protect us when we were children and when we were young from pain and suffering and things that were going on in our environment, just so we could survive. And those defense mechanisms and ways that we have developed to protect ourselves, they've outlived their usefulness, let us say, and they are really kind of keeping us from kind of fully expressing ourselves and making progress. And that's what you just reminded me of.
Right.
Right. Something I heard.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful process when you see everything is actually designed in reality to support you through that, and you're in an unhealed state, it's a problem, but when you heal it, it becomes your gift, and it's all right here always. But it's a process of living into that.
Well, and people have to realize that they need to be healed before they can be healed. So
Sure.
it's an important point to bring up.
Right.
So there's an expression: "Be careful what you wish for." Is that something to keep in mind here?
Well, again, it depends where that question is born from. If it's from a place of insecurity and from a place of escape, I don't want to bear this, I wish I could be somewhere else. Well, then, I'm not really even sure if it's going to do anything. But if it's something that's hopeful, and it's a vision that you have or a dream that you have, then be careful, because you may be unconsciously setting goals to bring that into reality, or really, it depends where it's coming from, I guess.
Well, I mean, I know that I always have to kind of steer you toward talking about politics, but in terms of what we're talking about in the election campaign, in terms of the policy prescriptions, for example, Donald Trump says he wants to ban all Muslims and he wants to build a wall, and Mexico's going to pay for it. If he wins, is he going to be sorry about having said all those things?
Well, how often have the presidential candidates lived up to what they say in the presidential run?
Not, that's true. Well, usually, and I'm not defending, presidential candidates or people who win the elections, but some of the things they want to do, they actually do manage to do, and others, like, for example, President Obama promised to close Guantanamo, still hasn't done it.
Sure.
But he did promise I don't know if he promised universal health care coverage, but he promised to cover a lot of people who don't have coverage, and he succeeded partly in doing that. And on the other hand, pissed off a lot of the other people who had coverage before. So in any event, I mean, you can never tell how these things are going to work out, but some things come out, some things actually work out, and some don't. And I just think, be careful what you wish for. That was what I was thinking. So I was going to ask you what role karma plays in whether thought forms reach fruition in the material world, and I know we kind of touched on it, but I mean, do you want to say anything about that? How does a person's karma play into whether what they want to do, what they plan to do, what they hope to do actually happens?
Right. Yeah, that's a whole. We have explored karma on the show, so yeah, it absolutely. I mean, it's a major role, but what is karma and how do you work with it? Essentially, your karma is where you are right here, right now. So if karma plays a role, it's only in the, so much in the sense that you're in the position that you're in right now, and your conscious state is where it is, and that's the way it is. There's not much more to it than that, I would think.
Mm-hmm. Okay, man. So that was, I guess, we're going to move on to another subject now. So we're dealing, I wanted to touch on this whole issue of thought forms, and I'm not sure I'm satisfied with everything we've discussed. I would rather go into more about thought forms at some point, maybe later, maybe in a couple of weeks. But this whole idea of thought forms and how they are things, actual things. It's just, you can't see them in the material world. But, if you were looking at somebody, say, on another plane of the many planes that we occupy, you would actually see something. So it's actually something.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. I mean, do you have any sense of that, Tim?
Yeah, well, I often think of the strange attractor theory. It's something that physics has taken a look at, and it's in chaos theory. And essentially what this is that, everything that's in this dimension, it states that it's imperfect. So if you think of a heartbeat and the way heartbeat actually beats, it's not steady, basically. I mean, it's steady in a sense, but if you really track it, it actually, when you map it out, it would actually map out exactly like all the galaxies spiraling around a spin point. And you actually can see that all of reality actually operates in this perfectly imperfect way, right? And the reason why I say this is because it seems to be that all the stories that we tell ourselves, all of our thought forms and visions and dreams that we project in a straight line into the universe, we've got all of this imperfect stuff spiraling around it, but you can sense the potential within this, but can you dust off all of that imperfection that's like shimmering around it along the way, and everything seems to operate this way. So that's what I think about. When you project a thought form out there, immediately people say the universe conspires to support it. Well, you could take a look, you could analyze anything, mental planes, emotional planes, all the people in the world, all the environment systems, whatever, but it doesn't matter. All this stuff is now spiraling around it. So can you dust it off to unpack that potential and bring it into the world?
Yeah, it's not easy. I've been trying myself for quite a while on a particular couple of things. Okay. I just think it's absolutely fascinating if you think about it, how there is nothing in the world today, almost nothing in the world that comes out of the human race. There is nothing. I mean, that it didn't start out as a thought form. It was nothing. It was nothing but a thought form. And then eventually we had a chair. We had a skyscraper. We had an airplane. I mean, these things take time sometimes, but they are starting with nothing but thought forms. And it's kind of amazing how it shows the way the non-material world impinges on the material world. It's an obvious thing. Okay, mass surveillance as a spiritual good. So this issue really pisses me off because obviously, I believe in kind of unearthing the spiritual underpinnings of reality, just as you do. On the other hand, if it turns out that mass surveillance is helping us spiritually, I don't know what's gonna. I think my brain might explode. So we live in a time in which everything we say, everything we write, data on everywhere we go, everything we like or dislike or are curious about is being collected by corporate interests and the state. This is a fact, folks. I'm not some crazy conspiracy theorist. We have plenty of evidence. We know we have a huge public discourse now, thanks to Edward Snowden, that this is going on. So these activities are unconstitutional. They undermine our right to privacy and turn the data on every single one of us into products which are bought and sold on the open market without our knowledge to people who do not have our best interests at heart, to say the least. So the collection of this data by the state, that's the corporate element of it. The collection of this data by the state, which goes back an undetermined number of years, includes a history of all the people we speak to or text on the phone, all the posts we make on social media, all the trips we take on debit and credit card purchase, transit cards or plane tickets, everything we ever bought at Amazon, and every Google search we make, it is all being collected at the behest of our spy agencies for future use. I would say for future use against us or anything the spy services find inconvenient to them, but certainly we can agree for future use of some kind. So for a number of years now, I have personally railed against the spy services for pretending that this is necessary for the prevention of terrorist attacks, and that these agencies, along with other elements of the national security state, take every opportunity to expand their budgets by claiming that they need to collect everything to, quote unquote, keep us safe. So I have argued with every ounce of strength that I have that there is no absolute security, and that if we follow the logic of the NSA on this, we will soon be as safe as birds in a cage. We'll be safe, but, what good will it be? However, and I find this extremely disturbing, and this is the topic of this, this segment here, the entire corpus of spiritual literature asserts that ultimately there is no separation between us, that there is a unity that far transcends the individual in his or her particular human body. So again, ultimately, this would suggest that in fact there is no privacy and there are no secrets to protect. So Tim, just to begin here, where do you come down on the issue of privacy and mass surveillance? What is your, if you have a position on that?
Like many of my positions, there's one level where I see it as the natural wrestling of, coming into relationship with ourselves and, coming into a more true relationship with our external environment and others.
Mass surveillance?
Mass surveillance, yes.
Because,
okay. There, yes, like you said, there is a unity to everything, right? But at the same time, we are personal beings, so there is a duality as well. If we wiped out duality, we'd be wiping out our egos, we'd be wiping out everything, and would just be this oneness with no hiddenness. Everyone knows everything, But
is that the ultimate goal of all this somehow?
Well, that's an interesting question. That is left to be undetermined. I actually don't think that is. I do think that privacy has a role, and I think I think we've talked about this in some of the other shows. What you even mentioned it earlier. There are certain dysfunctions of the ego which are there at first to help us survive, and only when we're ready, like a snake only sheds its snakeskin when it's ready, can we allow ourselves to show the world everything. And I'm not certain. Maybe there may be a point eventually, some would call it the golden age or the Sri Yantra or something, where everything is out in the open and it is what it is.
But Tim, this is the whole point of what I'm saying is that the intelligence services, they seem to be hastening that day.
Right. Well, we're seeing a negative. So there's a positive and a negative expression of everything. So we're seeing us move into unity. Right now, we're seeing the negative expression because there are a lot of unhealed egos out there. And, this is done for reasons of security and therefore insecurity.
Well, is it being done out of security, out of a need for security, or is it being done out of a need for huge profits of some large multinational national security state corporations?
Sure. Yeah.
Who love to have these kinds of threats that they can bandy about and frighten people into giving up their privacy and other civil rights.
Absolutely. That's true as well. I was going more in terms of the control and manipulation that they desire, because they want to keep it that way. But at the same time, that corporation mindset of growth. Well, that sounds like cancer to me.
Well, let me ask you this, Tim. I mean, just to try and can you explain to people when people talk about unity on the spiritual level, when they talk about that there's a oneness that transcends our individuality in ways that we really don't ordinarily understand, what can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah.
Like what is that? What are we talking about here?
Well, there's an interconnectedness to everything, but the oneness that everyone is talking about is not this oneness where, well, imagine you're living inside the sun and everywhere you look is just light. There would be no light because there is nothing in relation to that light. So there's just oneness, and there's actually nobody to perceive that oneness. So the oneness that we're talking about here in duality is actually much more beautiful. As personal beings, we are here with our own gifts to bring into the world, and that includes our own narrow view and our separation from it. And so the oneness that we talk about here in duality is a oneness that actually contains two-ness, a connection so strong that it contains disconnection at times. There's a paradox there. And there's always a paradox there. And when you can ride that paradox, well, the reason why we're here is revealed. A third thing is revealed, and that feeds that unity consciousness in a way that's greater than if it ever was just unity by itself.
Well, let me delve into this, what you just said, for a second. The spark of the divine that we all harbor, that is the unity, but the individual that this spark of the divine is is in a dual reality, and it can't really engage in the non-dual reality that spark of the divine may engage in. So you have these two things that are like, we're trying to integrate these two things,
right?
And it's a challenge.
Yeah. So think of it like the ego is here to be separate, but it's also here to find wholeness at the same time.
So, but sticking to the subject, so this spark of the divine that we all have,
mm-hmm.
And I'm saying,
well, when I say spark of the divine, I
do
do include the ego there. It's the illuminating urge to be.
Well, I'm talking about, all right, you're including the ego in that spark.
Sure.
So the egos are in a unity of some kind.
It contains, it's a vehicle to.
Because I've never thought that. I always thought that the ego was sort of part of the personality, or part of the, say the lower body's trying to integrate with these more, I don't know how to describe it, higher level ways of existing.
Yeah. Well, think of it like the ego is a part of it. It's not all of it. But it's a part of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the part of us that we're talking about that is in unity with all of the other parts,
mm-hmm.
that doesn't know duality. That's what you're saying, right? That there's part of us that doesn't know duality, because it is, there's nothing to compare it against. It is one, and it is in a milieu that there is no duality. Is that right? I mean, there's something in us that is beyond duality.
Yeah.
And that is the part of us that is in oneness, or in unity.
You could say, you could say that. And
I'm trying to kind of describe this. So my thinking about this was, and I could be wrong. I'm happy to be wrong, but my thinking about this was that this spark of the divine, people call it a soul, people may call it various things, but there is something that is animating this physical body here beyond, my instincts as an animal on the earth, and my personal identity as William Kern, blah blah blah. There is something in me that is beyond that is part of infinity, or part of this, the animating force that is started this whole process in the first place.
Yeah.
And that thing, it is in unity with all of the other elements of I don't know, the Godhead or whatever, that are involved with all of the other individuals in the human race.
Yeah, that's what. You would call that spirit.
Okay, but I'm saying that is the part we're talking about. There's a unity there.
Sure.
That part of us doesn't have secrets from other parts of it, and it is us operating in the physical realm, pretty much, as sort of like intellectual, semi-divine biological creatures that feel separate.
I would say it's
and that part of us wants privacy.
I would say, the part of us wants privacy until we don't anymore. It's when it's ready. The snake sheds its skin when it's ready. So, we all come in here with uneven levels of development, and you shed it off when you can. And I do imagine that there will be a point where there are no secrets, but here we are at the moment, seeing the negative expression of this unity coming down on us in the form of mass surveillance.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay, but so you wouldn't say that the mass surveillance being practiced by the NSA and corporations all over the world is helping bring about an awareness of this unity, or is it?
It absolutely is. Because the singularity everybody's talking about, that is the expression of non-dual consciousness. That is when you can see two sides of everything is actually a third thing. So if we see right here, this control system, this network, this electronic, brain prison, whatever you want to call it, communication system, if it unifies us in a negative form, well, the positive form is there as well. And to me, both are needed and both are of equal value, but I do have my preferences.
Right. So you wouldn't say you embrace it, but you would say, if it comes, it comes.
This is what it is. This is what it is.
Well, here's what bothers me about this.
Yeah.
Is that I don't want to be complacent. I don't want, how sometimes people say it's in God's hands, or it was God's decision, or God, I don't know, what did somebody say to me?
Let go and let God.
Well, it's sort of like taking the responsibility off of ourselves and saying it's all in God's hands. God, it decides everything.
Right.
So we can just stay home and, eat Cheetos and not really do anything, because God's dealing with all this.
Right. I would say that that's a cop out, or a misunderstanding of the way things work, because, we have to be in it. You have to be, you got to be in relationship to it. So what you're saying is, the fear is, okay, so if we understand that even a negative expression, even though we have a preference for positive expression, even a negative expression is how life goes on, and we're moving towards unity consciousness. So what's the point anyway? Well, the point is your personal relationship to it. And I know my personal relationship to it is I don't like it. I understand where it is. I understand it. So I have an open heart to it. I have an open heart to my closed heart to it. But I still want to, you
have an open heart to your closed heart to it.
That's the non-dual.
That's a good one.
I understand it. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to sit on my hands and not do anything about it.
Right. Okay. So, is this a truth we should absorb in political terms? Should we drop our opposition to the shredding of the Constitution and the end to privacy, since in spiritual terms there already is no privacy?
Well, we kind of already answered that, in that, when we're ready, well, we're ready, it's,
well, we might not be ready at the same time.
Right. Well,
be ready.
We all have uneven development, and that's why I will tell you, that's why this dimension is so beautiful. It shimmers in its imperfections and all our uneven development. That's really what it's all about. And, when you can see good and bad as two sides of a third thing, it's not true until it is for you personally. So, you do what you can with what you have. I don't know.
Okay, all right.
But I also want to say I love the Constitution, man. That thing's tight and loose, and it's a living document. It actually works very well with non-dual consciousness. Those guys knew what they were doing.
Mm-hmm. That's a very interesting take on the Constitution. I haven't discussed that with anyone on that in that way. Well, okay. So we're not gonna anytime soon. We're not going to know, we're not going to feel this unity, this spiritual unity. Most of us in our day-to-day lives are not going to wake up and go, I feel at one with everything and everyone in the world, and I don't need privacy anymore because we're all one, and this is not going to happen soon. This is kind of what I'm getting from you.
Again, you could have... you could wake up to it, and then you'll see. And it, like me, I understand the mass surveillance is a negative expression of the unity consciousness that's coming. I have a preference for positive, so I'm doing what I can to bring in the positive. So, you can wake up to it. And then, yes, there you have it. Here's unity consciousness. Everyone else, that's on them. I don't know if that makes sense.
It seems to me that as long as we are, living in these animal bodies, we're not going to get there. We're not going to get there until we're free of these bodies, because it is what drives us to do a lot of the crazy things that we do. I mean, basically, we're hungry, we're horny, we're whatever the hell, the body does, and the insecurity and fear about survival and all that gets us to do all these things, and many of which are foolish. And we're going to want privacy as long as that's going on.
Well, what's cool is, the mystics say that we're the holographic projection of the universe. So what that means is we contain everything that everything else has. So if you live in an all-inclusive, non-dual consciousness, then that craziness that you speak of is never going to go away. What is going to change, though, is your relationship to it. And that, to me, is true unity within duality, is that everything stays exactly as it is. Your relationship to it changes, and that, as a result, changes everything.
Well, that's the amazing thing about... non-dual Kabbalism is because it really does kind of remove a straitjacket that we all kind of felt we were wearing,
Right.
and then all of a sudden, what? You're right.
Yeah, it takes you out of
crazy.
it takes you out of a place of where you think it's supposed to be. Everybody thinks they have an idea of what unity consciousness is, but instead it drops you into a place of just being with things as they are. And when that happens, then it transforms into that place of, holy crap, this is what unity consciousness is.
But let me ask you a difficult question, Tim. As somebody who lucid dreams on a regular basis and is somebody that is a fearless spiritual explorer and looks at the non-material underpinnings of the people who come to you for help, are you privy without the knowledge of your patients to things that they would rather not share?
Oh man, good question. I would say with 50% of the time, I can pick up on something. Yeah, how do I answer that question? I mean, the short answer is yes. Now, whether or not I am right about it, or whether or not I am going to bring it up in a session, totally depends on my relationship to the session and the readiness of the client. And I would also say that generally I'm 50% right when it comes to, whether or not I'm going to, be digging into something like that. I don't know if I said that correctly. The short answer is yes, but it's a tricky business. You can feel, I can feel sometimes 10 sessions, if I'm working one-on-one with the client, I can feel 10 sessions down the road what healing I'm going to do, but I still have to live into it and meet the moment. And sometimes I'm right and sometimes I'm wrong. And the path to get there is not always exactly as I expected it to be, but you get, the hologram becomes clearer as you live into it linearly.
I want to try to understand something, Tim, because I think you mentioned, you've discussed how you help people when they come to you in the past. And my impression from you is that you don't really know, you don't exactly know what's going on. You sort of kind of put yourself at the service of healing, and then it happens. But whatever's going on, it's not really, or it's not certainly not exclusively on a physical level, right? I mean, it's on. It's in other dimensions,
Right. Yeah.
with other of the interpenetrating bodies that you're dealing
Sure.
with,
Yeah.
and that necessarily brings you into contact with the other information that perhaps this person may not have wanted you to know.
Well, the level of healing that we work at, the depth of it, allows to, work through all the four Kabbalistic universes. If you study Kabbalah, there's the physical universe, there's the universe of memory and form, and then there's Bria, which is, living in the known and the unknown equally. That's non-duality. And, the way we meet the moment and the way we meet our clients is, and just like we meet the world, the same mechanics exist on every level, is that we stay in the known, and then the unknown will reveal itself to us when we're ready, so we don't need to go seeking. Seeking and problem solving is a part of it, but it's included within the overall process of allowing the unknown to reveal itself when you're ready for it. So there's no real prying. I may know some stuff, but luckily it's coming into a place.
No, I never said you were prying, but I'm just saying that through this process, certain things become evident.
Sure,
So,
absolutely.
positing that a client sought the counsel of a healer or a shaman for some other purpose. What do you do when you obtain penetrating information, like, say, for example, they participated in a murder or robbery, or in reference to the first program we ever did, a terrorist attack? I mean, what do you do then?
Good question. I meet the moment, and I'm not sure. I actually, in my own clientele, have not had something like that reveal itself to me yet. So, that's going to be a part of my journey to meet that when I do.
Okay, that's pretty interesting. I don't know, how do we get there to this unity, and do we want to get there? I don't even know. I mean, it's really uncomfortable to me that even you agree that the mass surveillance could be a spiritual good. I'm like a little bit shocked by it all.
The only way that I beat the spiritual healing drum, I say show up, find a healing modality that you like, keep staying curious, keep living in the question, asking questions, and keep meeting the moment in that way. Just do your healing work and more reality will be revealed to you. It's about strengthening the ego so you have a container to take in more. That's what it's about.
You're listening to Cosmic Perspective News, where spirituality and hard news coexist.
Okay, so I want to start this segment. So we're going to do this segment on every show, and we're trying to stick to a one-show-a-week schedule, and I guess it'll probably be done later in the week, and we'll post it on Monday or Tuesday. That seems to be the way it's going to be for now. If you spot a news story that's at the confluence of news and spirituality, email it to contact@cosmicperspectivenews.com or post it on our Facebook page and we'll try and take it up on the next program. So, Tim, I just arranged these, news stories. I want to get your non-dual Kabbalistic shaman take on these stories, and maybe, look at them in a different way
All right.
than most of the time people will do. So the first story is about the use of ayahuasca, and it's from Fox News Latino, and I could say that it's written in a very, I would have to say, ignorant, sort of Nixonian, let's schedule the drugs sort of a way, sort of allowing for the fact that it might be useful, but they're skeptical. So this is from Fox News Latino, headline: Despite risks, Americans flock to Amazon, not Amazon.com, the Amazon, for ayahuasca ritual and spiritual awakening. So I'm just going to read a little of the news story. A centuries-old ritual from the Amazon region is finding its way to a growing number of Americans who are giving ayahuasca, a powerful psychotropic plant, a try in their quest for spiritual enlightenment, usually in the form of faraway retreats. I mean, you could tell that the person writing this has never done psychedelics in their life. And they are, they're describing this as a ritual where, that is only the tiniest part of what this is. But I will go on. A select group doesn't need to travel far, since a few years ago the Supreme Court authorized ayahuasca's use in 6 U.S. states, though the court limited its use for religious purposes only. You know something about the ayahuasca movement, right, Tim? I mean, did you know that people are using it in the United States in various places?
I've used it several times in the U.S. myself.
But it was a part of these, authorized ritual, authorized tribal events, or
I've done it both under the religious context and both under traveling shamans sending emails under the guise of something else.
Okay, so we'll get a little more into that in a minute. It goes on: while shaman, indigenous priests who perform the ritual, it's like they're indigenous priests who perform the ritual. There are a lot of shaman that are not indigenous priests, like Timothy Rothschild. So this thing doesn't. These people have not done a lot of research. I go on. Have been around forever in the Amazonian rainforest, where the days-long quote-unquote trip is meant to do its magic in conjunction with nature. In recent years, the practice has become increasingly popular among Americans, to the point that many are venturing to remote jungles of Latin America for the experience. But those who do could be putting their lives at risk. Even some celebrities have been known to have traveled south for an ayahuasca experience, including Sting, Chelsea Handler, Michelle Rodriguez, and Jim Carrey. The cost for an average 6 to 12-day retreat in Peru is between $1,000 and $3,500, which typically includes housing and moderate meals, but not airfare. The ritual has been around for centuries. Shaman were already cooking up the brew, also known as La Medicina, when Spanish conquistadors landed in South America in the 16th century. Quote, ayahuasca opens you up to possibilities. Christian Breeze, founder of the Guia Sagrada Shamanic Retreat Center in Ecuador, told Fox News Latino. And I believe Dr. Dennis McKenna also, he runs some kind of retreat in Peru, doesn't he? Mm-hmm. So, Tim, you got the story. They go on at the end of the story to talk about how Americans who had a bad experience and how dangerous it is, and blah, 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 and that DMT is a Schedule I drug because Richard Nixon had a conniption in the late 60s and he hated the counterculture. So it's illegal in many parts of the U.S. What would you tell people? What would you say to people about ayahuasca?
Being a non-dual Kabbalistic shaman, I'm no ayahuasquero. However, I've participated in a number of ceremonies. I have dated somebody whose aunt married a shaman and is traveling around and is doing these ceremonies. And that's who I've participated with many times. So I am in the world, and I've done extensive research in it. I would be careful about engaging in a ceremony if you are on certain pharmaceutical drugs such as SSRIs, et cetera, et cetera. Do your homework is basically what I'm getting at. That aside, when that woman had mentioned that it opens you up to possibilities, what she's talking about is real healing and real transformation that allows for you to not make a decision to avoid one thing or the other, but instead to be able to hold all possibilities and allow your preferences to reveal themselves. True freedom. And that only comes from a true transformational experience. And that's where ayahuasca works. It works on your body, what they call it, the great purge, or the vine of the dead, called the vine of the dead, not because you're going to die, but because your old self yourself is going to die, and it purges you because it literally wrings you out like a towel, and your toxins are going to come out one way or the other. And it also works in, like you said, your mental, emotional, and your spiritual and etheric bodies. It is a full ride, and it is not for wimps.
So, I mean, can you compare it to, say, LSD or something like that? Is it similar to it, or
Much different. Much different.
It is.
Yeah, I mean, of course, there's psychedelic effects with all psychedelics. However, ayahuasca is a true journey, and I would not recommend doing it without a guide and a shaman that is able to guide you. It's a beautiful ceremony, and there are parts to the ceremony that are there for a reason. The shamans would say that the spirits are the ones, the plant spirits are the ones that told them how to do all of this, and I believe that. And with that comes the songs and the music, the tools, so the tobacco. The whole process is there to support the healing journey, because it really is that transformative. You need support systems in place.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the shaman understood the setting rules that Timothy Leary and Ram Dass figured out in the late 60s, a long time ago. Okay, that's ayahuasca. That's our ayahuasca talk for today. So next, none other than Lucifer became part of the 2016 presidential race this week, when former House Speaker John Bonner, a former Catholic altar boy, called Ted Cruz Lucifer in the flesh. When asked about Cruz, Bonner said, quote, "Lucifer in the flesh. I have Democratic friends and Republican friends. I get along with almost everyone, but I have never worked with a more miserable son of a bitch in my life." So said John Bonner. Now, it occurred to me, since Lucifer's name has come up, we should explain to the degree we can who Lucifer is. Exactly. As far as we know, or as far as the literature we have available to us, and having looked through this quite a bit in my life, I am going to read you part of a book called the Urantia book. I know a lot of people disparage it. Other people think it's the most important spiritual related book in hundreds and hundreds of years, and it does provide a tremendous amount of detail on this. So I'm just gonna lay it out, and I don't know if Timothy wants to say anything about this, but I'd be happy to hear it if he does. So most people equate Lucifer, also known as the son of the morning star, with Satan and the devil. But according to the corpus of spiritual literature, this is not the case. The most detailed account of who Lucifer was, as I said, is in the 4,700 onion skin pages of the Urantia book. I read this book maybe 25 years ago. I found it on a shelf at Weiser's bookshop in Manhattan, which no longer exists, and I couldn't believe the damn thing. It blew my freaking mind. It's either the most incredible science fiction book ever written, and I mean it. I mean, it is so well written. It uses the English language to the nth degree, beyond anything you would have ever seen in any book, I guarantee you. It goes into anthropology, astrobiology, the Bible, and puts detail in every biblical story that you've read in the Bible, which is, touched on and all talked about in, ancient language or kind of clunky old language. It does it in modern English, and it is pretty amazing to look at. Now, the Urantia book, by the way, says that our local universe is called Nebadon, which is one of 8 super universes. It has 10 million inhabited worlds. It touches on many sacred books, including the Old and New Testaments and the Quran. It makes no claim. I make no claims about the accuracy of Urantia or the Bible or the Quran, for that matter. Neither does Timothy. Let's say that. So the Urantia book says about Lucifer, and I quote with nomenclature you may not recognize and we will not explain today, quote, "Lucifer was a primary Lenanendek son of Nebadon. He had experienced service in many systems, had been a high counselor of his group, and was distinguished for wisdom, sagacity, and efficiency. When commissioned by the Melchizedeks, which, according to the Urantia book, is a corps of beings said to deal with planetary emergencies, and Melchizedek was a figure in the Bible. You can go look at that. Lucifer, he was designed as one of the 100 most able and brilliant of the over 700,000 of his kind. And a lot of the book, the Urantia book, describes the different orders of beings in the universe and their role in the big A administration. So they rate how brilliant or whatever. It's sort of like a Fortune magazine list of the most capable administrators in the universe. From such a magnificent being, I'm reading again, through evil and error, he embraced sin, is now numbered as one of the 3 system sovereigns in Nebadon. In other words, there were 3 planets involved with this rebellion that the Bible touches on and hints at and, kind of teases you with. There are 3 system sovereigns who will succumb to the urge of self and surrender to the sophistry of spurious personal liberty, rejection of universe allegiance, a disregard of fraternal obligations, and blindness to cosmic relationships. Satan, according to Urantia, was his chief assistant. So, in any event, just to keep things straight, as far as the devil is concerned, he is the individual called Caligastia, this world's deposed planetary prince. So, according to Urantia, there are officials, they have, and they've given it names, and they've given them titles that we can understand. So, apparently he was in charge of the planet when Christ Michael is said to have walked this planet in the flesh as Jesus of Nazareth. Lucifer, Satan, and Caligastia reputedly worked together to undermine Christ's mission here and were ultimately defeated at a desert encounter discussed in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, not to mention Martin Scorsese, Mel Gibson, and countless others as the temptation of Christ. So the devil was number 3 in the unprecedented planetary rebellion said to have occurred on this planet, according to Urantia, long before Adam and Eve arrived at the head of a large delegation to begin settling this planet, as is said in Light and Life. And again, Urantia goes into painstaking detail about Adam and Eve and who they were and how they arrived and the whole thing, and it's pretty damn interesting. So, Tim, I'm not going to ask you if Ted Cruz is Lucifer, but what do you think? We have these books. Spiritual literature is, you can't prove it by scientific research. You can't show, there is some evidence that there was a Jesus of Nazareth, in other words, a Jewish rabbi who roamed and was not pleased with the Pharisees and was sort of rebellious. And, all of that, there seems to be some circumstantial evidence for. But how much stock should we put in books like Urantia, the Bible, the Quran, or whatever? What do you think?
Well, first, I find it hysterical that this is the lightning round of the news program for us.
Yeah, I spent a little too much time on that, but I didn't know how to. When you read Urantia, you're like, how do you shorten this? How do you, I don't know. I had to get it in.
No, it's relative. This is the lightning round compared to the Urantia book. As you know, I have it on my bookshelf. I sleep right next to it every day, and I look at it, but I do not read it. I do open up a page or two every now and then, but I don't know. I don't. It's a lot, and I'm looking forward to the day that I finally get through it. So, secondary, I love that you brought this up. I think it's absolutely fantastic, and I do. I'm a great student of Edgar Cayce, the great American prophet, the sleeping prophet. Died in the 1940s here in the United States, and he tells us a much similar story. And I'm even, these stories they carry so much power to them. I get chills as I talk about them. And it's the before Adam and Eve stuff. When you get to Adam and Eve, the reason Adam and Eve seemed to be created was because this human design, the one that I speak so fondly of these days, was necessary with the chakra system and everything in order to bring us back from this original rebellion or this fall from consciousness or this forgetting and fall into deep duality. So I wanted to say that because I think it's such a phenomenal story. Wow. Okay, so now to answer your question, how much stock can we put into books like the Urantia book, the Bible, and the Quran? The way I see it is every now and then, one of us, like a flower in a field of plants, blasts off into cosmic consciousness and wakes up, is filled with love, and has some stories to tell and some truth to express. And just like everything else in this world, as personal beings, we've got our unhealed ego structures. We receive this information in one way or another. The violence of interpretation ensues, and we record this in books. And from there on, the kaleidoscope rolls on, and here we have it. So ultimately, from time to time, we do have people, cosmic explorers, saints, really beautiful mystics that can come and sort of rewrite the books that are needed, that can shed some light on the perversions of other ones. But like everything else, it's a process. So, be careful, but at the same time, there's a lot of truth in them.
Well, I could say that having read, I really a huge corpus of literature having to do with religion and spirituality. The Urantia book blew my freaking mind when I read it. And it's still, if you look at it, it's a pretty amazing piece of work, one way or another. So, okay. So next, we have a story from about virtual reality from Mashable. So A man has broken a record. He has spent 25 hours in VR wearing an HTC Vive, which is another kind of headset I hadn't even known about. And we'll have, we're going to have videos with most of these news stories up when we post this program on Monday, probably. So the article starts out, someone finally went and decided to try living in virtual reality for a full day, and in the process set an official Guinness World Record for the most time spent in VR while playing a game. Filmmaker Derek Westerman and a team of producers set up a living room in a Los Angeles apartment to see if he could spend an entire day wearing the HTC Vive and using its controllers to manipulate virtual space. Wearing a suit and tie, he then set about exploring virtual environments rather than sitting down to play one or two traditional role-playing games for an extended period of time. That detail is key, as it's likely or far easier to zone out and play a game for hours rather than force yourself to aimlessly wander through virtual environments on your own with no particular goal. Instead of a particular game, he used Tilt Brush, a VR painting app, the entire time, which means he had to remain engaged and moving to create new line drawings throughout most of the experience. But the experience wasn't necessarily a smooth one, as around the 17th hour, Westerman appears to get a bit of vertigo and vomits into a bucket hastily provided for him by an assistant. That same bucket served his needs sometime around the 6th hour, when Westerman was forced to urinate into it while remaining strapped into the Vive headset. Then around the 21st hour, Westerman begins babbling incoherently while continuing to wave the Vive controllers, at one point saying, quote, "I don't know where I'm at," unquote. His entire 25-hour and 2-minute VR view is displayed on a nearby monitor that the producers and assistants can watch as his tilt brush flourishes slowly devolved into a listless virtual his tilt brush, he's painting, flourishes slowly devolved into a listless virtual scribble.
Wow.
So, Tim, you and I had a show about VR. People could find it on Cosmic Perspective News. You want to go? We talked about its ramifications and long-term consequences, I should say. Just as part of what you and I are trying to do, I have been researching VR. I've been wearing this headset and trying all these, and it can get you dizzy, but it's getting really, really good. It's very, very immersive and convincing and shockingly personal. What do you think about people doing this and doing it more and more? And I'm asking you again, as I've asked you before, what's going to happen when people find that they would prefer the virtual realities they can partake in to the one that they have to live through every single day?
Yeah. As always, it depends on your own personal relationship to it. However, you can see so many different possibilities. The escape artists that are constantly, it could almost be the escape artists, the people that don't want to be here, that can create these magnificent and beautiful environments and all these other I don't even know, realities. In many ways, you hear me saying it all the time, the same mechanics exist everywhere. So that's where science says we may actually be living in a simulation here. These simple patterns
That's
are
right.
constantly, recreating and expressing themselves, fractal nature of reality and so on and so forth. So, if we can get that good, if we truly are the holographic projection of the universe, these gods with a little g, we could be creating these awesome environments, and who knows, all these different states of consciousness. And I don't, anything is possible. Really, that's the singularity. On the other end of this, it could be this really beautiful and weird, and you know what? I think it's going to be everything. That's really what I think. And you're going to have a lot of choice, a lot of freedom, and it's just going to be it's going to be absolutely wild.
But Tim, look, I mean, if we're here to learn lessons, say, and to overcome things that we have, are an impediment to spiritual progress, how is being in a virtual environment where we don't have to encounter anything unpleasant, for example,
Mm-hmm.
how is that going to help us evolve spiritually, which is why we're supposedly here?
Right. So as a god in training, I guess you would understand what it's like to create a true dualistic environment that contains everything. And then you'd come into a new relationship with chaos.
Yeah,
pain.
but that people aren't going to do that.
Well, they would learn, eventually they would learn. I mean, a life filled with pleasure and nonstop pleasure, that again, that's like being in the sun and looking around and seeing nothing because all there is light. You'd say, I want a little darkness in here. And you'd realize, hey, mass surveillance is here for a reason, and maybe we need a little privacy. You see what I'm saying?
Well, all I can say is, and I really should write a book about it, that I see A lot of people being found with drool coming out of their mouths, not having eaten because they didn't forgot they were supposed to eat, or whatever the hell, either dead or incapacitated. I think it's going to happen a lot,
I
and
agree.
it's a weird thing, and it's coming fast, because what we can do with our smartphones and a $35 pair of headsets, it is a mind blower. Seriously.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this, Tim, before we move on to the next story. Doesn't the creation of these devices add credence to an assertion I made when we interviewed Dr. Dennis McKenna, which is that the human race may deep down want out of this context of existence entirely?
Yeah, that's definitely that's some of our views. I would say it's not my personal view. As I've done my healing work, I lived into a new way of being where I freaking love it, man. And I can tell you, a couple years ago, I wouldn't have been saying that. So it really depends on each individual.
Well, I understand, Tim, and I guess I don't think we disagree, but I think we maybe are focusing on a different thing, which is what I focus on. I mean, you've often talked about how amazing the human body is and how incredible it is, but I focus on how this human body has been designed to integrate lower and higher bodies,
Hmm.
thus, if you want to say, dragging down the higher bodies or making them, I mean, in other words, there's part of us that is so far beyond what I would call this bullshit.
Take a
But
break.
that part of us that is beyond it really can't engage in what it would prefer to engage in, because it's so busy trying to bring along these parts of us that are part and parcel of being an earthling.
Yeah.
And so it really, I understand it is an amazing instrument, blah, blah, blah. But, it is making a virtue out of necessity in a way.
Well, at
To
the
me.
same time, everything is built into this, so you don't have to push it so hard, man. Rest, fun, play,
I completely agree.
pleasure.
I completely agree. I'm not arguing with you about that,
I'm
but
not
I'm just
saying it's
saying,
easy.
it does annoy me. So, moving on here. Here's a headline from World Religion News: Buddhist monk mummified and covered in gold. I'll just read some of this here. A Chinese monk who breathed his last breath in 2012 was encased in gold leaf to be used as a shrine. Fu Hao, the monk, spent a major part of his life meditating inside Changfu Temple in Quanzhou City, southeastern China. As recognition of his dedication to Buddhism, the temple had him mummified where he died. The objective is to inspire others of the Buddhist faith to follow Bante Fuhu's example. And we have videos of him being encased and being unencased, and photos of it on the website at Cosmic Perspective News if you want to look at it. You want to look at him being pulled out of the pottery and covered in gold leaf, etc. The abbot of Chengfu Temple said that after the monk died, his body was washed and then examined by mummification experts. The body was then sealed within a large pottery jar in a sitting position. When the jar was opened, during the appropriately named open cylinder ceremony, a large crowd gathered to see the spectacle. The video shows the experts deftly removing the material that wrapped around the corpse of the monk. After the process was completed, the statue was placed on the mountain so people can worship it. My question to you, Tim, is: will encasing the mummy of a beloved monk in gold have the desired effect, inspiring Buddhists to follow his example? What do you think?
I can't help but feel like we've come full circle here. We're back to mummification and the reasons of doing it. I find this fascinating, obviously. And I'm as curious as you are to see if it does inspire. I have no answer to this. I'm just, I'm standing in awe.
Well, I mean, this is not a new practice. I
Right.
mean, this is something that, does it inspire people to have these monks encased in gold and then stuck here and there? People, I can tell you from personal experience, people do flock to these shrines. I don't know, whether it inspires people who were not believers before or not. I don't know. Is this so? I mean, let's say we agree that it does inspire people to be good Buddhists, for example. Is this a practice that you would recommend for other august or inspiring individuals?
Once
Is this something we should embrace?
once you drop your body and the vehicle, is no longer of use in the way that it was originally intended for. Anchoring your beliefs and your good deeds and all that stuff, into the physical universe as a gift to others to remind them and inspire them. If that's what it does, who am I to judge? It is what it is.
Okay, all right. Moving along here, another monk-related story. Mixing spirituality with artificial intelligence, a robot monk captivates China. This is from the New York Times. And I guess we'll find out what Tim thinks about whether robotic healers would be a good idea in a minute here. Quoting the article, a childlike creature in an orange Buddhist robe, monk Xaner, a 2 foot tall advice dispensing robot whose full title is, quote, worthy stupid robot monk, because in the Beijing dialect, stupid is a term of affection. It sounds like This robot is an object of fascination amid an increasingly urgent pursuit of spirituality and more recently artificial intelligence. But Jian Fan, the head of the Comic Center, and yes, it's called the Comic Center, told National Business Daily that the temple did not plan to commercialize the robot, that its development was for the public welfare. Jian Fan told the Beijing News, we're not doing this for commerce, but just because we want to use more modern ways. Okay, it's not really a sentence. We're not doing this for commerce, just because we want to use more modern ways to spread Buddhist teachings. I don't know what happened to the New York Times, but that is not a sentence. Onward. The temple created the robot last year in collaboration with about a dozen Chinese technology, culture, and investment companies, according to Chinese news reports. But the character Xianer was first designed by artists at the Comic Center for a 2014 Buddhist comic book series, whose first title was Troubles Are Self-Made. The series has sold well in Chinese bookstores. An English language edition is due out soon. As a robot, Xianer has expanded his repertoire. He has a touchpad on his chest that allows him to respond to supplicants' questions and statements such as, who are your parents? I'm not happy. And what is the meaning of life? On Wednesday morning, employees at the Comic Center declined to let visitors communicate with Xianer, saying he was recharging in order to meet a delegation of government officials from Beijing later in the day. They would not say who the officials were or give their own name, saying they were not authorized to speak to the news media. So, Tim, where do you stand on the robotization of ministering to people?
What's the difference between that and commercials and ads and stuff? It's in a new form. It's the same thing. It's an algorithm running to get a desired result.
But they are replacing all kinds of people at every level of human society with robots now, and they are using artificial intelligence and I would assume that eventually this ministering robot will have lots of data in it and artificial intelligence, and maybe do a job just as good as a human cleric.
Right.
No?
Making room for something new to be. Stand for good, you stand for change. And granted, a lot of people that are going to be holding on to their jobs that are replaced as robots and aren't going with the flow. Well, they're going to be limiting themselves. So you got to go with the flow.
Okay. So you're not going to express any consternation about this.
I'm curious to see where it goes. I can't see myself going to the robot, to get my self-help or, be guided to unity consciousness. But, there's got to be something to it. I trust in it. I just, I'm like you, man.
Well, what about, let's suppose you might be, let's say you're reaching the end of your life and you have yourself uploaded into an artificial intelligence device so that people can come to you from now until the end of time, just like they did all the times you were alive.
I don't think it's the same. I don't think that's the same thing. So I don't think you can compare the two.
Okay.
Because I think these vessels, the human bodies, they have something special about them, a connection to something that these robots don't.
Mm-hmm. All right. I think we also touched on that in our virtual reality robotization program a couple of weeks ago. Okay. Let's talk earthquakes. Britain's Daily Mail, which is known for hyping predictions of disaster, or rather hyping everything, has reported this story, and the headline is, this is a headline, believe it or not. This is what the Daily Mail always does. They have this really absurdly long headline. The South is sinking, giant chunks of Earth's mantle falling off and causing earthquakes across U.S. Southeast, and more are coming, warn researchers. That's the headline. Okay. The southeastern United States has been hit by a series of strange, unexplained quakes, most recently the 2011 magnitude 5.8 earthquake near Mineral, Virginia, that shook the nation's capital. Researchers have been baffled, believing the area should be relatively quiet in terms of seismic activity, as it is located in the interior of the North American plate, far away from plate boundaries where earthquakes usually occur. Now they believe the quakes could be caused by pieces of the Earth's mantle breaking off and sinking into the planet. A new study found pieces of the mantle under this region have been periodically breaking off and sinking down into the Earth. This thins and weakens the remaining plate, making it more prone to slippage and causing earthquakes. The study authors conclude this process is ongoing and likely to produce more earthquakes in the future. So, what I want to ask you, Tim, and these articles come out every so often about and the Daily Mail loves this kind of thing where there's potential. Somebody says something, and the potential is that it could be devastating. How they managed to publish this without ever mentioning fracking is a mystery to me, because a huge number of earthquakes have started happening since fracking began. But in any event, the overwhelming majority of scientists say the weather, sea levels, and hydration rates are greatly impacted by human conduct, and people associated with prophecy often connect these types of events to human behavior. So I recall statements from certain religious leaders, for example, that 9/11 was payback for the acceptance of gay people and growing U.S. hedonism. So, Tim, does non-dual thinking or non-dual Kabbalism offer any advice about how to consider earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and similar types of events? Is there some connection to the human race or human behavior? What do you think?
There are many answers to that question, and many of them I'm aware of my limitation as a shaman at the moment. I could say that this is a question that I would love to get some of my extraordinary teachers on the show to answer, because I've just entered my fourth year in the school, which enables me to start doing something called impersonal movement, and we drop into levels of consciousness that I believe, it's my suspicion, because I can see the smirks on my teacher's face when I ask them, that this is the level of awareness that you can sense tsunamis coming and these sorts of things, where you start to be in this realm where you're very much feeling the mist of consciousness that surrounds all of us. That's the nothingness that's actually full of relationship to everything else. It's a level that I'm just starting to become introduced to, and it's been a phenomenal journey so far. And I have school in another 2 weeks, so I'm excited to dive deep into it. And I have a feeling that I can answer this question much more deeply in about a year or two, and hopefully the earthquakes don't get us before that.
But you would not discount the possibility that there is a connection between. Well, I mean, look, I mean, I'm not talking about human behavior in terms of pollution and bringing on things. That's pretty straightforward. But in terms of our morality or our lack of it, or our, that kind of thing having an impact on the planet, that seems to be a theme running through, thousands of years of spiritual literature.
Absolutely, I hear where you're going.
And I never really, to be honest, didn't buy into that myself.
You never did. Well, that's interesting. I'm a firm believer in it.
It may be the case. I'm asking, genuinely asking.
And I think it has a lot to do with actually our emotional state. I think that we have a strong connection to the weather and to the form of the planet that we live on. And I think that our emotional well-being has a strong impact on literally on the weather systems, including earthquakes, tsunamis, tornadoes, and hurricanes.
It sounds, getting back to the issue of thought forms that may or may not be, expressing themselves in the physical environment. They may have a connection. The connection to this, there's like a connection, the planet and us as beings on the planet. We're reacting to each other, and it may not just simply be the pollution and other things. It could be psychically. There is something going on here. There's an interrelationship here.
Yeah, and each one of these systems, the emotional body, the thought forms, and then as it comes into reality from sort of that immaterial thought form that's born from our emotions, essentially what it is you get this feeling, then a thought arises from it, and that's now in some ways a structure or a form, and you can feed it if you want to, and you can allow that to go back and forth between your emotional bodies and bringing it out into the world. So if you learn to meditate and learn to not be, have that monkey mind, you may not get caught up in that structure and have that inform, what is brought into the world.
Okay, man. So we're going to finish up this program with one more news story, which blew my mind, to be honest with you. Earth houses 1 trillion species of microbe. Only 0.001% are known to science. This is from Nature World News. Humans have been living on Earth for a long time, and yet we know almost nothing about the other organisms that inhabit our planet. A new study suggests that Earth may be holding nearly 1 trillion species of organisms, but only 1,000th of 1% of these organisms has been identified, which means that 99.9% of all life forms are yet to be discovered.
I agree.
I mean, this reminds me of the study a couple of years ago that found that we just realized we can't see 90% of the matter in the universe. We suddenly realized this just a few years ago. 90% of the matter in the universe is invisible to us.
Right.
Now we found 99.9% of living things on this planet are unknown to us. What amazes me is that we in these four-dimensional bodies think we have a bead on things, and there is so much evidence we don't. And it is absolutely mind-blowing.
Yeah, and that's the paradox. We do know a lot more than we used to know, but, we've fallen asleep to certain realities that we weren't awake to, a couple thousand years ago, 100,000 years ago. And, the more you know, the more we realize that we don't know, and I think that we live in an amazing time where this crisis in physics is going to start to meet mysticism. And, those tools are going to be seen as very limited. And the greatest tool of all, like and I'm going to say it, is the human body.
Well, that's what we've got.
That's right. It's all right here, baby. There's always more to explore on the archive page at cosmicperspectivenews.com with each program and each guest. To learn more about our hosts, visit Tim Rothschild at thethirdthing.net and check out worldmeetsamerica.com for the latest broadcast by journalist William Kern.